Around the year 180, in the Roman city of Lugdunum, modern Lyon, in Gaul, a bishop opened a copy of Revelation and found what he considered a corruption. In chapter 13, the number of the beast was wrong. Not 666, 616. 18 centuries later, the oldest surviving copy of that verse would come out of an Egyptian garbage mound, and it sides with the number the bishop tried to bury. The bishop was Irenaeus. As a boy in Smyrna, he had listened to Polycarp teach, and Polycarp had known John. 2 handshakes separated this man from the author of the Apocalypse. Concerned enough to stop the argument of his 5th book midstream, he put it in writing. The true number was 666, and the copies carrying the other reading had been altered by careless scribes. Which means the oldest surviving fight about the number of the beast is not happening in a comment section. That argument is 18 centuries old, and it was already an argument about manuscripts. The uncomfortable part is this. The number Irenaeus defended won. 3 sixes went into nearly every copy, every translation, every sermon, every horror film. The one he condemned was supposed to disappear. Then, in 1999, scholars at Oxford published a cluster of papyrus scraps pulled from an Egyptian garbage mound a century earlier. Together, they formed the oldest surviving copy of the verse, older than anything now in existence that Irenaeus could have held. On it, the number reads 616. So this investigation opens with a claim, and we will return to it at the end, word for word. 666 and 616 are not a contradiction. They are 2 keys cut for the same lock, and the lock was built around the name of a Roman emperor. To understand where the second number came from, you have to start in a hole in the ground. In the winter of 1896 going into 1897, 2 Oxford scholars still in their 20s, Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt, began digging at El Banisa, about 100 miles south of Cairo, on the site of the ancient city of Oxyrhynchus, the city of the sharp-nosed fish. They were not excavating a temple or a palace. They were excavating the town dump. For roughly 1,000 years, the people of Oxyrhynchus had carried their paper trash out past the walls and left it in mounds. Tax receipts, private letters, lost plays of Menander, fragments of the Gospel of Thomas. The desert air preserved nearly all of it, layer upon layer, like sediment made of language. Grenfell and Hunt shipped crate after crate back to Oxford. There was so much material that publishing it became the work of generations. Volume after volume. Decade after decade, a small team of specialists reading a dead city's waste paper one fragment at a time. In 1999, volume 66 of the series reached 26 torn pieces from a single ancient Codex of Revelation. The editor, a papyrologist named Juan Chapa, catalogued the pieces as Oxyrhynchus Papyrus 4499, under the numbering system used for early Christian manuscripts. It became Papyrus 115. The handwriting dates it to the 3rd century. Estimates run from roughly the year 225 to the decades either side of 300. On any dating, it is the earliest surviving witness to Revelation chapter 13 anywhere on earth. On the fragment carrying verse 18, where the number of the beast should stand, there are 3 Greek letters with a horizontal stroke drawn above them, the ancient signal that letters are being used as numerals: chi, iota, stigma, 600, 10, 6, 616. In 2005, when fresh imaging of the fragment reached the newspapers, headlines around the world announced that the church had spent 2 millennia fearing the wrong number. One scholar, Ellen Aitken of McGill University, told reporters the evidence now leaned towards 616 as the original figure. A careful investigator does not stop at one piece of evidence. So let me put the rest of the file on the table. Another 3rd century papyrus of Revelation survives. Papyrus 47, held in the Chester Beatty collection in Dublin. It reads, Chi, She, Stigma, 666. The 2 oldest witnesses we possess, copied perhaps within decades of each other, disagree. The great 4th century Codex Sinaiticus carries 666. So does Codex Alexandrinus in the 5th century, and so does nearly every Greek manuscript copied after them, along with early translations into Syriac, Coptic, and Latin. But there is a 5th century Bible in Paris called Codex Ephraemi Rescriptus. During the Middle Ages, someone scraped its pages clean and overwrote them with sermons of Ephraim the Syrian. Across the 1840s, the German scholar Konstantin von Tischendorf spent 2 years reading the ghost letters beneath the newer ink. In Revelation 13 verse 18, that codex does not even abbreviate. It spells the number out in full Greek words, hexakosioi deca hex, 610 and 6. The trail widens. An ancient Armenian translation reads, 616. Near the year 380, a North African commentator named Tychonius worked from a Latin text of Revelation that read 616, and his reading echoes down through later Latin commentators. Tischendorf recorded 2 medieval Greek manuscripts with 616, both have since vanished, and one late manuscript reads 665, a number with no defenders at all. So the question is not whether the 616 reading is real. It is real, it is ancient, and it sits in the oldest copy of the verse in existence. The question is what it is doing there. Go back to Lyon, around 180, and read what Irenaeus actually wrote, because his testimony is the single most important deposition in this case. In Book 5 of Against Heresies, Chapter 30, he states that 666 is found, quote, in all the most approved and ancient copies, and that it is confirmed by, quote, those men who saw John face to face. Stop on that sentence. Irenaeus is not guessing. He is citing manuscript evidence, copies that were already old in the 2nd century. He is citing an eyewitness chain, men who had known the author personally. This is the strongest external testimony that exists for any reading anywhere in the book of Revelation. Then he turns to the rival number, and his tone sharpens. He does not know, he says, how some have erred and vitiated the middle number in the name, deducting the amount of 50 from it. His diagnosis is scribal error. In Greek numerals, 666 is chi. C. Stigma. 616 is chi. Iota, stigma. One character in the middle, a g worth 60, flattened into an iota worth 10. Subtract 50. He goes further, he pronounces a solemn warning on anyone who adopts the false number knowingly. For Irenaeus, this is not a trivial variant. Get the number wrong, he argues, and you may fail to recognize the beast when recognition matters most. Notice what his testimony proves, regardless of which number is right. For a bishop in Gaul to be rebutting 616 and writing around 180, copies carrying 616 had to be circulating widely enough to worry him. That pushes the variant deep into the 2nd century, within living memory of the book itself. Both numbers are nearly as old as Revelation. Neither one is a modern invention. Then Irenaeus does something that should stop every prophecy teacher cold. He admits he cannot solve the number. He offers 3 guesses at the name it encodes: Euanthus, which he shrugs at; Latinus, the Latin one, which he finds plausible since Latins hold the empire; and Tatan, which he likes best, an ancient, royal-sounding word of exactly 6 letters. Then he steps back from all 3. If the name were meant to be proclaimed openly, he reasons, the one who saw the vision would simply have said it. Safer, he concludes, to wait for the fulfillment than to guess at names. Sit with that. The man standing 2 handshakes from John, the man who could cite copies older than anything we now possess, had the number and did not have the name. Whatever this cipher was, the key had already slipped out of the church's hands within 3 generations. Which raises the question this entire investigation turns on. What was the key? To find it, you have to unlearn something so basic you have probably never thought about it. You have to unlearn the difference between letters and numbers. In the 1st century, that difference did not exist. Greek had no separate set of numerals. Alpha was 1, beta was 2, iota was 10, rho was 100. Every letter carried a numerical value, which means every word was also a sum, and every name was also a number. Think of it like a butcher's scale. In that world, writing a name down was like laying it on the scale 1 letter at a time, each letter with its own fixed weight. Set the letters down, and the needle swings to a total. 2 different names can pull the needle to the very same mark. And a writer who wanted to be careful could hand you the weight instead of the name. This was not occult practice, but street-level literacy. The Greeks called it isopsophy. The Jews called it gematria. And we have it scratched into 1st century walls. At Pompeii, sealed under ash in the year 79, a wall carries the line, I love her, whose number is 545. Another reads, Amerimnus thought upon his lady Harmonia for good. The number of her honourable name is 45. Flirtation conducted in arithmetic. One detail closes the distance to Revelation. Down in the basement of the marketplace at Smyrna, one of the 7 cities Revelation itself addresses, graffiti published by the papyrologist Roger Bagnall plays the identical game. One line reads, I love her whose number is 1308. Number riddles from Revelation's world were being scrawled on the walls of Revelation's own cities. The Jewish Sibylline oracles play the same game in reverse. They compute the name of the Son of God, Iesus, Jesus in Greek, and announce his number with reverence. 888. Now read Revelation 13 verse 18, the way its first hearers heard it. Here is wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The verb translated, calculate, is the turning point of this entire case. In Greek it is psephisato, built on the word sephos, a pebble. The small smooth stones Greeks slid across counting boards to do arithmetic, and dropped into urns to cast votes. The same verb appears in Luke 14 verse 28, where Jesus describes a builder counting the cost of a tower before laying the foundation. John is not saying tremble at this number. What he says instead is, get out your pebbles, do the arithmetic. This is a sum, the sum has an answer, and the one with understanding can reach it. The verse does not command fear, it commands calculation. One more detail from the Greek. The text says it is the number of a man, arithmos anthropou. Anthropos, a human being. Some scholars read the phrase generically, a human sort of number, and I flag that as a live minority reading. But 4 chapters later, Revelation chapter 17 decodes its own beast imagery as a sequence of kings. The book points at rulers, at individual men, so the original audience was handed a weight and told to find the name. The question is whether any name from their world pulls the needle to 666. One does. Build the suspect profile first, straight from the text. The beast makes war on the saints and overcomes them. The beast demands worship. The beast has a head that took a death blow, and the death blow was healed. And the whole world marveled. Finally, the number must have been solvable by ordinary believers in the Roman province of Asia in the 1st century. Now open the file on Nero Claudius Caesar, Emperor of Rome from the year 54 to the year 68. In July of 64, fire tore through Rome for the better part of a week, died down, and fled again, leaving only 4 of the city's 14 districts untouched. The historian Tacitus, writing about 50 years later, records that one rumour refused to die. The order had come from the palace. And so, in his words, Nero fastened the guilt on a group the crowd called Christians. What followed is the first state persecution of the church on record. Tacitus, no friend of Christians, describes believers torn by dogs, fixed to crosses, and burned as torches to light the emperor's gardens after dark. He adds that even hardened Romans began to pity them, because this was plainly not justice, it was one man's cruelty. Church memory placed the deaths of both Peter and Paul under this emperor. If you had asked a believer in Asia around the year 70 to name the beast that made war on the saints, there was exactly one answer available. Then came the wound. In June of 68, abandoned by the Senate and the army, Nero took his own life, and the dynasty of Augustus died with him. The empire convulsed, 4 emperors in a single year, and something stranger happened. People refused to believe he was dead. A rumor spread that Nero had escaped east beyond the Euphrates, into Parthia, and that he would one day return at the head of an army. Historians call it the Nero Redivivus legend, Nero come back to life. This was not a fringe rumor. Suetonius records that impostors claiming to be Nero kept surfacing. One in the year 69, another in Asia around the year 80. A third around 88, backed by Parthia so seriously that the affair nearly ended in war. The Jewish Sibylline oracles absorbed the legend and gave the returning tyrant a title. They call him a great beast, a ruler who demanded divine honors, who made war on the saints, whose death wound the world could not quite believe in. The profile is not subtle. But a profile is not proof. Proof is arithmetic. So take the emperor's name and title exactly as it appeared on the Greek coinage passing through their hands, Neron Kaisar, and transliterate it into Hebrew letters the way Jewish writers of that era actually did. You get 7 letters, Nun, Res, Vav, Nun. Then Kuf, Samech, Resh. Now weigh them. Nun is 50. Resh is 200. Vav is 6. Nun is 50. That is 306. Kuv is 100. Sameka is 60. Resh is 200. 360, 306 plus 360. 666. Before you object that the spelling was rigged, know that the objection has been raised and answered. From a cave near the Dead Sea, among the documents recovered at Wadi Murabbat and published at Oxford in 1961, is an Aramaic deed of debt, dated in its own wording to the 2nd year of Nero Caesar. It spells the emperor's name in precisely this way: Nun, Re, Vav Nun, then Kuf, and the traces of the letters following it. I will mark the caveat honestly, because this channel deals in receipts, not wishes. The end of that word is damaged. And the standard rabbinic spelling of Caesar carried an extra letter, a yod, which would push the total to 676, but the surviving traces on the Murabat deed leave no room for a yod. The short spelling is not a theologian's invention. It stands in the everyday paperwork of Judea, dated inside Nero's own reign. It is a receipt for a loan. The scholar Richard Borkham, in his 1993 study The Climax of Prophecy, noticed something that turns the cipher from clever into surgical. Take the Greek word for beast itself, therion, in the form the verse uses, and transliterate it into Hebrew letters by the same method. Weigh it, 666, in Hebrew letters, beast and Nero Caesar pull the needle to the same mark. On Borkham's reading, the number does not merely point at the emperor, it equates him with the monster. Now the moment this entire investigation has been building toward. Write the name the other way. In Latin, the emperor was not Neron, he was Nero, no final N. Transliterate the Latin form into Hebrew, and one letter drops off the scale, the final nun. The nun is worth 5,666, minus 50, 616. Go back to Lyon one more time. When Irenaeus described the corrupted reading, what were his exact words? Deducting the amount of 50. He could see the arithmetic of the change with perfect clarity. He never saw the name inside it. Both numbers weigh the same man. One weighs his name with a Greek accent, the other weighs it with a Latin accent. Bruce Metzger, the 20th century's most cited authority on the text of the Greek scriptures, put it carefully in his textual commentary. Perhaps the change was intentional precisely because the Greek form of the name in Hebrew letters yields 666, while the Latin form yields 616. In other words, the scribe who wrote 616 may not have been breaking the code. He may have been translating it, recutting the key so it would still turn for readers who said Nero instead of Neron. Two keys, cut for the same lock. Now I owe you the strongest counter-argument, because this is the first place in this investigation where I take a position, and I will label it as exactly that. My opinion held after hearing the other side. The brief against Nero runs like this. Back in the 1880s, the Irish mathematician and theologian George Salmon laid out the 3 unwritten rules of beast hunting arithmetic. If the name alone will not produce the number, add a title. If Greek fails, try Hebrew or Latin. And do not be too particular about spelling. His verdict has been quoted for well over a century. A key proves little if it fits a lock in which almost any key will turn. Nor was he wrong about the abuse. Across the centuries, the sum has been forced onto Muhammad, onto individual popes, onto Martin Luther, onto Roman emperors from Caligula to Vespasian, to Hadrian, onto modern politicians by the dozen. And the Nero solution uses a title, a second language, and a rare spelling, all 3 of Salmon's rules. Add the loudest silence in the file. Irenaeus, closest of all to the source, never once breathes the name Nero. The objection is serious, and it deserved to be stated at full strength. Here is my judgment, and I hold it after weighing Salmon. Every rival key opens one lock, Nero's name opens both. The Greek spelling produces exactly 666. And the Latin spelling of the same name produces exactly 616, the precise pair of readings preserved in the earliest manuscripts. For any other candidate, that second fit must be dismissed as coincidence. For Nero, it is the same calculation run twice. Nor is the spelling conjured out of convenience, it sits on a dated deed from his own reign. When one suspect explains both pieces of evidence, and every other suspect explains only one, an investigator does not call that luck. As for the silence of Irenaeus, I can offer only informed speculation, and I label it as such. He read the beast as a figure still to come. He dated the vision late, to the end of Domitian's reign, and he worked in Gaul in Greek and Latin, a century removed from the Jewish Christian world where Hebrew letter values were second nature. Revelation itself signals that world twice, pausing mid-vision to give names in Hebrew. Abaddon in Revelation 9 verse 11, Ha-Magedon in Revelation 16 verse 16. The book flags its own cipher language. By Irenaeus' day, the readers who thought in that language were largely gone. Keys get lost that way. Not by conspiracy, by demographics. So both numbers point at Nero. That still leaves the question printed on the cover of this investigation. Which number did John actually write? Textual criticism has a discipline to it, and its first rule is that witnesses are weighed, not counted. 10,000 late copies descended from one exemplar amount to one voice. Age matters, but age alone does not decide, because an early manuscript can carry an early mistake. The case for 616 is stronger than most believers have ever been told. It holds the oldest physical witness, Papyrus 115. it holds a high-quality 5th century Codex in Ephraemi. It held manuscripts old enough to alarm Irenaeus in the 2nd century, plus the Latin line running through Tychonius and the Old Armenian version. David Parker, professor of textual criticism at the University of Birmingham and one of the leading figures in the field, has argued that 616, less memorable, less symmetrical, may well be the original reading. There is a real logic behind him. Scribes drift toward the more satisfying number. 666 is 3 matching digits. It answers the 888 of Jesus in the Sibylline tradition. It even shadows the 666 talents of gold that flowed to Solomon each year in 1 Kings 10 verse 14. A copyist is far more likely to improve 616 into 666 than to break the pattern going the other direction. Some who favor 616 read it through a different emperor entirely, Gaius Caligula, whose Greek name and title weigh exactly 616. During the year 40, Caligula ordered his own statue installed inside the Jerusalem temple, and only his assassination in January of 41 stopped it. Philo of Alexandria, who led a delegation to that emperor, recorded the terror firsthand. I flagged the Caligula reading as a real minority position, argued by serious people. The case for 666 rests on breadth and on time. Papyrus 47, nearly as old as 115, carries it. Sematicus carries it. Alexandrinus carries it. 3rd century commentators, Hippolytus, Origen, cite it without hesitation. Towering over all of it stands the deposition of Irenaeus, given more than a century before our oldest surviving papyrus was copied, appealing to manuscripts already ancient and to men who had seen John's face. Add Metzger's observation. Suppose 616 is best explained as a deliberate Latin recalculation of 666, then 666 accounts for its rival. In this discipline, the reading that explains the other reading usually wins. My second judgment, labeled like the first, is this. I hold that John most likely wrote 666, chiefly on the strength of Irenaeus' 2nd century testimony and the breadth of the early evidence. But I hold it as a probability, not a proof. A serious minority of specialists disagrees, and your own Bible sides with them further than you may realize. Open a modern translation tonight. Revelation 13 verse 18. Look at the bottom of the page. The Revised Standard, the English Standard, the New American Standard, the New Living? The New Revised Standard, nearly all of them carry a small print footnote that has never once been read from a pulpit you sat under. Some ancient authorities read 616. The variant was never hidden in an Egyptian dump. It has been hiding in plain sight in the margin of your own Bible, directly beneath the verse you were taught to fear. Notice what does not hang on the outcome. If 666 is original, the number names Nero in Greek dress. If 616 is original, the number names Nero in Latin dress. The dispute between the manuscripts is a dispute about the accent. The lock does not move. Which brings us to the part of the verse everyone skips on the way to the number. The context. The verse before says no one could buy or sell without the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name on the right hand or the forehead. 1st century believers in Asia did not need that decoded. To buy and sell was to handle Caesar's silver. A denarius of Tiberius, the tribute coin of the Gospels, carried the emperor's portrait and an inscription. Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. Son of a god, stamped on the money in your palm. The cities of Revelation's 7 churches were frontline territory for the imperial cult. Pergamum had held a temple to Rome and Augustus since 29 BC. The city Revelation 2 verse 13 calls the place where Satan's throne is. Smyrna had raised a temple to the emperor Tiberius. Trade guilds feasted beneath the emperor's image, and refusing the feast could cost you your trade. The placement of the mark is a dark mirror. Deuteronomy 6 verse 8 commands Israel to bind the words of God as a sign on the hand and between the eyes. The beast demands the same real estate. Whatever else the mark is, it is a parody, a rival claim on the 2 places God had already claimed. So in its 1st century, this number was not a fright, but a name tag pinned on an empire, a way for the churches to say in a cipher no prosecutor could read aloud in court. We know exactly what Rome is, and it is not a god. Armor for people who might die for refusing a pinch of incense. Then the context died. Watch what the institutions did with the orphan number. Once the empire converted and the church settled into its palaces, the number lost its address. Interpreters across the centuries ran the arithmetic against Muhammad. Reformation pamphleteers ran it against individual popes. Catholic controversialists ran it straight back against Martin Luther. Each side wielding the cipher of a martyred church as a club against other Christians, While the emperor it named lay 15 centuries dead, the modern prophecy industry inherited the superstition and monetized it. A figure that had named a dead emperor was relocated into the future and bolted onto whatever technology was newest. Social security numbers, product barcodes, credit cards, implanted chips, entire ministries have been financed on the fear, the dread soaked into the culture at large. In 2003, American highway officials renumbered United States Route 666, the so-called Devil's Highway through the Four Corners, as Route 491, partly because travelers kept stealing the signs. When Ronald and Nancy Reagan retired to Bel Air, the address waiting for them was 666 St. Cloud Road. They had the city change it to 668. There is even a clinical name for the dread, hexacosio I hexaconta hexaphobia, a Greek mouthful meaning fear of 666. Maybe you know the small version of that dread personally. The receipt, that totals $6.66, and the half second where you consider adding a pack of gum just to move the number. If that reflex lives in you, understand where it came from. John did not put it there. His verse tells you to calculate. Somewhere across 20 centuries, the institutions that taught you the verse traded the calculation for a flinch. They handed you the fear and kept the key. That sets up the last position I will take and the last counter-argument I owe you. The counter-argument is the futurist reading, and it is ancient, older than most of its critics admit. Irenaeus himself expected a final Antichrist still to come. Apocalyptic writing can carry more than one horizon, and a first-century referent does not exhaust a book that speaks about the end of all things. Careful scholars, not cranks, hold that John used Nero as the pattern of a tyrant yet to come. That reading deserves respect, and I give it mine. My position, plainly labelled as the third and final opinion of this investigation, is this: whatever future the number carries, its first address was Rome, and any reading that vaults over Nero to land on barcodes and microchips has cut the one wire connecting the verse to the man who wrote it. Revelation 13 verse 18 cannot mean less than it meant in Ephesus and Smyrna in the first century. Taken honestly, the pattern reading does not weaken this, it sharpens it. Should the number name a type, the state that demands worship in exchange for bread, then it was built to be recognizable in any century, precisely because it was recognizable in the first. You do not need a decoder ring for the future, you need the clear eyes the number was minted to give. Return, one last time, to Lyon. Around the year 180, Irenaeus at his writing table, defending 3 sixes he could not decode, condemning a rival number whose mechanics he could describe, the deduction of 50, but never see inside. He stood 2 handshakes from John, and the key was already gone. 18 more centuries would pass before a rent deed from a desert cave and a scrap from a garbage mound put it back into our hands. So here is the verdict of this investigation, word for word as promised. 666 and 616 are not a contradiction, they are 2 keys cut for the same lock. And the lock was built around the name of a Roman emperor. The scandal was never that the oldest manuscript reads 616. Greek scribe and Latin scribe alike were guarding the same name. The scandal is what came afterward. A cipher forged to give persecuted believers clear eyes about their empire, converted by centuries of institutional teaching into a superstition that polices license plates and grocery receipts. The scribes kept the secret. The custodians lost it. Zoom all the way out. Nero has been dust for nearly 2,000 years. The empire that stamped its divine sons onto silver survives as museum cases and broken columns. Augustine records that even 4 centuries on, some still whispered that Nero would return. Then even the whisper died. Every power this number ever named has ended. The number is still here. It outlived the emperor. It weighed the empire that feared him, the scribes who carried it in 2 spellings, and every institution that misused it since. Because beneath the arithmetic, it makes a claim that does not age. Many interpreters across the centuries have heard it in the shape of the number itself, a figure that reaches for 7, the number of completion, and falls short every single time. 6, 6, 6. Man and man and man, never God. And Revelation knew you would need something better than a number to carry. The only other place the book uses that pebble word, Cephos, is Revelation 2 verse 17, where the one who overcomes is promised a white stone, and, on the stone, a new name. The beast reduces a man to a sum. The lamb hands a person a name. That is the whole war, held in 2 small stones. Tonight, read Revelation 13 verse 18 again, slowly. Notice that it never says fear the number. It says count it. One of those verbs came from John. The other was added by 20 centuries of poor custodians. Sit with the difference, and with the fact that the answer to the oldest riddle in your Bible may have been waiting in the footnote all along. If you want to keep reading over the shoulders of the scribes, the oldest copies, the readings that never made your translation, subscribe. The next manuscript we open was never supposed to survive at all.